Well, hello, Jimmy, again. It seems that many analysts are divided over the effectiveness of the African Union. After 50 years in existence, analysts say that the organization often has trouble mustering troops for its peacekeeping missions. It is also underfunded, with many of its members failing to pay their annual dues. But others say it has grown teeth in recent years, suspending countries that have suffered coups, imposing sanctions, sending envoys to mediate between governments and rebels, and genuinely promoting investment. With all that said, let's take a look at the question of the week for today's program. How viable is the African Union after 50 years of existence? First, thanks to all of you who took the time to post your comments on our Facebook page or sending us an email. There was a lot of passion, Dimi, in every response we got throughout the week. And without any further ado, let's begin with a comment from Bob Luwanga from Kampala in Uganda, who posted this very critical comment on our wall. If the AU had been able to do the following in the last 50 years, I would consider it viable. Number one, he lists, turn all or most Africans into functioning democracies. Number two, create a single market bloc with the ability to sell goods and negotiate as a unit with the rest of the world. And number three, lift standards of living by creating jobs and making a bigger middle class. And number four, I should say, reduce the number of people dying of preventable diseases, malaria, and HIV and AIDS. Bob adds that as it is right now, it's just a club of visionless guys who come together every now and then just to have fun and help each other stay in power. Well, another comment comes from Mwesiga Credius from Nairobi in Kenya. He says, the AU is still under external influence and dominance, and yet we are asked whether it's viable. I say no, no, and no in caps. African leaders, he writes, need to put aside their greed for power. Dimi, I'm starting with the bad first. As you just heard a lot of criticism, of course, I will have some positive reactions as well, but let's tackle these two comments.
Well, I tell you, Mariama, what I can see for sure is that there's a lot of concern and a lot of anger against the African Union somehow for what it has not achieved. And Mr. Mwencha, I want to come in with you at this point, addressing this issue of people calling the African Union a bunch of visionless guys. And then I've heard the comment more and more often about its external influences and the lack of the African Union to generate its own funds and pay for its own programs instead of being so reliant on the external forces, and in this particular case, international donors. Can you touch on that?
Well, let me start with the last one, which you talk about in terms of external influences. At independence of most African countries, yes, Africa was caught in between these competing forces, the so-called Cold War. And Africa found it very difficult to navigate in that difficult terrain where one had to align themselves whether with the East or West. And Africa, a number of countries decided then to align themselves, a few of them very significantly, with non-aligned movement. Then thereafter, after the Cold War, came the international call it influence on the narrative of Africa, giving blueprints for economic development, which could have come whether in the form of structural adjustment program and so forth. And Africa implemented some of these very faithfully, to the extent that we saw deindustrialization, agricultural sector collapsing, education collapsing, and so forth. But I can tell you in the last 10 years, as someone has pointed early on, if you see growth rate that is taking place in Africa, why is that happening? It is, first of all, Africa has started to take charge of its own destiny. Africa is asserting itself. Africa is now demanding a fair share in the global economy, and Africa is demanding to shift from being given narratives to Africa determining priorities. If you look at even the way we are now cooperating with the international community, it is on the basis of what we have produced, like our strategic plan. We tell the international community, whoever is coming to work with us, these are the priorities we are going to work with. and we have outlined them. I can tell you that. And
Okay.
anything outside this, we say we are not interested. So I can tell you Africa's independence is on course, and of course, we've lost time, but that is the path.
Now, Mr. Mwencha, we'll come back to you in a moment, but I want to throw this point back to you, Mariama.
And just taking advantage to tell Mr. Mwencha, sorry for putting him in the hot seat, but it's the viewers and listeners who are writing, and we have to put those questions on our show. We're going to move on to a posting from James Yinsab from Accra, Ghana, who writes, "We should remain very focused and build strong and powerful nations. When weak nations come together as unions, they will surely produce weak unions. Let's build stronger nations first." And last but not least, Godfrey Ismailin Ko from Dar es Salaam in Tanzania says, "The growth rates in many parts of Africa had been resilient, even though a number of countries on the continent had been among the hardest hit during the global economic crisis. Despite that troubling reality, trade and investment have been expanded. But the world must engage more resolutely to help bring an end to the conflicts that continue to tragically claim the lives of so many Africans." Dimiaki, a little less critical and a little more talk about the fact that things are changing toward an eventually positive outcome for the entire continent, even if it seems to move at a slow pace for some. I also see some practical advice.